Welcome back to the Afterword, a conversation about the future of words. We are glad to have Javier Mombiela and Coach Greg Fulton here with us to continue our conversation about the World Cup and how it tells the story of the world. So in our first conversation, we looked at the language of the World Cup. We talked about things like championship and diversity. We talked about how people from different countries will migrate to another country maybe in order to play for the World Cup or for teams that can participate in the World Cup. We talked about how sometimes people can buy their way onto teams if they're wealthy enough, particularly if they're living in a country that's plagued with a lot of economic inequities. But let's dig in a little bit more to some specifics. Let's start by talking about the role that soccer plays in global politics. I remember in Guatemala in, 2011, when one of the leading candidates actually made, I will take Guatemala to the World Cup, was one of the leading presidential candidates platform. And I believe he came in second out of a field of about 7 or 9 candidates. So can you all help us understand the role that soccer plays in campaigns and elections around the world?
Yeah, I also remember that candidate specifically. I remember the whole city was hyped about the fact that we might make it to a World Cup once. I think this is mostly, as we were mentioning before, mostly in poor countries, right? That their only professional sport is soccer, unlike the States or other countries that have the NFL, the MLS, the NBA. So most of the poor countries only have soccer professionally, right? And as I mentioned before, it's passion. It's for the fans. It's love. They really love the teams. They would start fights for it. Which team is better, which team is not, which player is better as well. So when a candidate, for example, in this case, came up and said, "I'm going to take Guatemala to a World Cup," something that every country wishes to be in the World Cup, but Guatemala had never obtained this prize. So this meant something really good for all these people, mostly as well uneducated people, right? Because educated people knew this is something that could be possible with or without this candidate, right? But these poor people who love soccer, and it means everything to them, it's like, oh man, we're going to make it to the World Cup. So it's a really, really big deal for the poor countries, right? And this is why I think soccer has a really great power in politics, and mostly in poor countries.
Yeah. So I would agree. Actually, the last statement you said was mostly in poor countries. I think you'll see it thrown around more in some of these poor countries. However, anytime you have a mass of people that all are passionate about something, if you can own that something or even create the illusion that you can control that, I mean, you're going to have a backing of a lot of people. So it makes sense whether it's kind of like, this might be a little foreign to Javi, but like when we're in elementary school and we're running for class president, you're like, we're going to put Pepsi in the water fountain so everybody gets free Pepsi. Like, it's just, everybody wants that, I guess, as a kid, but it's not something that you can just do. And so now there's a lot of things within politics that affect World Cup and affect whether your team can go or not. So they have a little bit more control than you do over the water fountains as a kid. But I don't even know how I got on that. But ultimately, it's a tool, and you have such a desire for your country to be the best in the World Cup. It's your benchmark in the world in a lot of ways. And so it makes sense at some level that they would do that.
So there's a level, I guess, of civic pride or national or maybe ethnic pride attached to your team then. Like how your team performs is a reflection of how good your national identity is.
In a lot of ways, yeah.
Mm. Yeah, that's fascinating. I had a class president promise us all chocolate milk every single day. So yeah, it didn't pan out really well. But you're right though, Greg. I mean, if you have something and somebody wants that, then a lot of people can be manipulated or persuaded, if you will, to consider that option. So let's shift just a little bit, because recently the media stories have been talking about the disparity between the pay in male and female soccer players. So what do you see moving forward on this issue, and how can this inspire future footballers? What do you think, Javi?
Okay, yeah. So this is something really interesting. Actually, I saw, I think, a really huge soccer page on Instagram posted something about the women's U.S. soccer team, right? I think, I'm not really sure. Did they like get the same pay as the men's, or they were like, or they wanted, right? So yeah. So something about that. Actually, I actually think that they do deserve the same pay as men, right? They are doing the same things as the opposite gender is doing. So I actually agree with that equal pay. But one thing is true, and I'm not trying to make girls seem less, but the men's sport is the one that actually pulls all these people, right? And there's also a women's World Cup, and I don't think it even receives half of the views as the men World Cup does. And it's sad because it's actually still interesting, right? It's the same sport, it's the same event, the same competition, same countries. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think the sport is really popular, and I think it's the same with every sport, right? It's sad, but also with tennis, you see that the women's competition is played like a day before, and the men's is like the main event, and also with other sports. But I also think it can be a motivation for future athletes, girls. Right now that they are seeing like the U.S. Women's soccer team are receiving the same pay, that they can actually make it to the same level, right? And if they get the same pay, it means that they can also get the same amount of views, the same amount of fans. So I think it will be a motivation for these girls to work hard and show that they can show the same stuff to the world as the men can do it.
Excellent. What about you, Greg?
Yeah, so it's an interesting topic that it's a tough conversation to have, to be honest. It's mainly because, the women's national team has been fighting for a long time to receive equal pay. And if you look at it from the surface and you say, man, they've performed way better than the men's team in the world game, and they've won how many World Cups, and the men haven't even really come close to touching it. And so there's that argument that you hear a lot, and there's a lot of truth to that. And so as far as performance goes, it's like, man, they're outperforming the men in a lot of ways. So, it really comes down to, previously, the argument against it was always that, like, well, think of all the money that the men bring in because of how many people show up and pay for tickets and the sponsorships and all these things. And so that was always the barrier. But the beautiful thing about this question is the second part, where it talks about how can this inspire future footballers. So we talked earlier in the first episode about Guatemala and how, hey, I might make $1,000 a month playing here professionally, but I could go to Europe and make, $1 million a year or whatever, 10 million, 20 million, whatever it is, depending on my level. So the carrot of the money could be the thing that leads and progresses the women's game so much further. So making that equal pay, I think, is going to really excel, because now someone who's a phenomenal soccer player, but she says, you know what, I'm going to go to school for nursing and make way more money. Now there's that opportunity to actually do what she loves to do and get paid well for it. And now you're going to see that game rise, because you're not going to have so many people just leaving the game early or not even trying at all, just because there's no future in it. So you wouldn't see the men's game where it's at without the money. It's just the reality. So that's the beauty of what's happening, is now we can really see how it progresses over the next several years.
Barry, that's excellent. I love both of your take on this, and it is inspiring. And I hope all of our listeners and those with young girls will encourage them to get out there and kick those balls, soccer balls.
Okay, well, the topic that is absolutely dominating 24-hour news cycle as we're recording this is Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And FIFA has banned Russia and its teams from World Cup play. The news of Poland not playing Russia in the World Cup playoffs and tournament with the European Football Association that was to be played in Russia, that's now been relocated to France. How is this conflict between Russia and the Ukraine going to affect the World Cup now and going forward? And what do you think the significance will be to the sport into the future?
So, this is actually the first time that I've seen a nation that historically is pretty good in the World Cup. Russia typically performs very well. Dangerous team. Very easily could be in the group of death. Touched on that last episode. And, I've never had this where there's been an invasion and all of a sudden, the world's standing behind this one country. So it's new to me as well. And so as I think through it, I think it's the right response that they banned them. It is, as the whole response has been, there's been a lot of sanctions on Russia. And I think you think of one place where you wouldn't imagine it would affect your country, and that's in the World Cup. And especially as we approach the World Cup in, several months, at the end of the day, it's a bold move, but I think it's the right one for me. I think it's something that's going to make them think. It's not just shrug your shoulders. Oh, well, doesn't hurt us. We're going to keep doing what we're doing. I think it's the country, the people. Again, we talk about the politics of it all. The people, if you got 1 million people that were pumped to see their team go play, and now you got 1 million people against you because now they're not going to see that. So it's a great way to sway maybe the public opinion and or political opinion of what are we doing and is this right? It's a fine line though. How easily that could go too far if FIFA just started doing that whenever just to get what they wanted. And so it's a fine line. So it's a bold move. I think in this scenario, I like it, but it's not something I hope to ever see again.
Yeah, actually, I couldn't agree more with Greg. We've been seeing on the news that Russia's been getting a lot of fines and bans. But I think, as he mentioned before, like I saw one, like it was something against the oligarchs, right? It actually affects the oligarchs, but the rest of the people are like, it's not me, right? But when something like the World Cup, like you said, everybody was pumped to see it. And yeah, also Greg mentioned that Russia is always a really strong team. They always make it past through the knockout stage. They always have great players like Shaqiri, and they are always making a great show, right? So the people were hyped up to see Russia play, right? And like he said, it's the masses. Russia is the biggest country in the world. How many people are going to be wanting to see their country play this, because they haven't seen the World Cup since 4 years now, right? And actually, another thing is that if this conflict gets worse, it can also affect the World Cup in a really huge way, right? Because it's in Europe, and it's really close to where the World Cup is supposed to be played. So right now, there's been talks between Putin and Ukraine's president, right? Let's hope that they do talk about peace, right? But the thing is that if it gets worse, there's also possibilities that the World Cup might even get canceled. So this can really affect the World Cup and the world in a really huge way.
Interesting point. Very interesting point. And, it's rather somber and kind of a tough thing to consider. I appreciate both of what you were saying, Greg. It is a fine line for sure. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out, no pun intended. What is the future of the World Cup when we think about international soccer in general? So, Javi, you shared that the World Cup has been around since 1930. We're not that far from 100-year centennial celebration of the World Cup, that type of thing. So, and you just gave us a name of a Russian player. So who are some of the players and the stories we want to be watching in the next few years as we think about maybe the upcoming World Cup in 4 more years, or what do we need to be looking for?
Okay, yeah. So everybody knows, right, that like every sport, you're going to be like at your peak maybe 2 years, and you're going to be able to play about 10 years, 15 max, and then you'll have to retire. So it's sad because a lot of people are going to be right now expecting the last Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo World Cups, and they want them to do well. Maybe it won't happen, right? Because they're already old and the teams aren't one of the favorites. But yeah, talking about the new players and new stars, I think right now we've been seeing a lot of these great names. For example, in last World Cup, Mbappe, which was only 19 years old, he's now 23. He's going to be one of the stars for this World Cup, I think, and a few other ones, maybe 1 or 2 more. We also have a Haaland, more European players. I think right now Europe has a better level than America, and I think most of the upcoming stars are going to be from Europe. Haaland, Mbappe. We have a lot of Spanish players like Pedri and Gavi from Barcelona, also from Real Madrid, like Vinicius Jr. and all those young stars, right?
Okay. What do you think, Greg?
Yeah, so there's a few stories that pop in my head, and you can go on and talk about, he's mentioned all the big names. The biggest story is going to be the retiring of Messi and Ronaldo. There's not a bigger story. They're both getting up there in age. I think for me, he even mentioned maybe it's already too late, like, because they're not favorites. However, you look at the last World Cup, 2 World Cups ago, I believe, when Argentina made the final, and they lost, and they had so many chances, Messi included, to win it, and it just didn't happen that day. And you think about that moment thinking, oh, there's another World Cup, but at this point, there's maybe one. And so it's one of those things where you might look back and say, what if? And it's one of those, and that, to be honest, is the biggest differentiator of why people might call him the greatest ever and not the greatest ever. So that's a huge story. You look at like CONCACAF, which is what the United States is a part of. It's our association. And so you look at this almost changing of the guard, where Canada is not just kind of making progress. I mean, they're overtaking 2 of the strongest associations in CONCACAF, which is the United States and Mexico. Also with the United States, you look at the fact that we missed we missed a World Cup in Russia, consequently. So the last World Cup in Russia, we didn't qualify. And so you've got these young stars like Pulisic, who's playing for Chelsea, just won the Champions League. You've got all these young players that missed this massive opportunity to develop. So how does that affect the United States? And so there's all these little subplots all over the place of little stories that could change the trajectory of a country's success or failure, and even a player's, how he's viewed in history for the rest of eternity. Like, that's all coming to a head here in less than a year, so there's a lot of stories that are happening. And when the beauty and the curse of every 4 years is that you only get a few World Cups if you're lucky. You might get 2, most people 2, and then potentially only 1 if you're on a team that can qualify. So it's not like you go out next year. So this is somebody's whole life, that's coming. So anyway, it's what makes it beautiful to me.
Yeah. Okay. The name that keeps coming back to my mind when you think about retirement, and I didn't think about retirement being a story, but you're absolutely right. I think about Pele. I mean, every little kid in America, and when they thought about soccer, that was the name, right? And so, when you think about the movies and the stories and things that happen, that is part of it. Yeah. Interesting.
All right. We have one final question we like to ask folks that join us on the Afterword. What's a metaphor to help us understand the power of international soccer?
Okay, so I think that one metaphor that would be that we could use that would be easy for other people to understand the power of international soccer right now that we were talking about war could be that the World Cup is a war, right? Every team has their military. A captain could be like the sergeant, right? The coach could be, or the captain lieutenant and the coach, the sergeant. And then you have the associations behind it, which could be like the politicians. And everybody wants their team or their military to be the best, right? Everybody wants to win. Because the best military will get the final prize, which is going to be, in this case, a recognition, right? That everybody wants to have. But I think it's a good metaphor because it includes the whole world. So it could be like a huge world war, right? Not only a few countries involved, but 32 countries involved. Everybody fighting for the same thing, right? But only one of them being victorious.
Yeah, that is the best metaphor, hands down. I think maybe a spin off of that. This isn't a good metaphor, but I'm going to throw it out there. Like for me, it kind of mixes like the war idea with like travel. So like when you go to Brazil, you see the colors, you see the vibrancy, you see this. When you go to Germany, you see, the street design and the regimented. And so often when you watch a team play at the World Cup, you're watching these characteristics of their country built into their team. It's their society. If you want to learn about how a culture is, watch their team play. And if you understand the game enough, you'll know their culture, a good chunk of it. And so, for me, that would be maybe the second, but it takes a little bit, a different set of eyes to really understand that. But if you could mix the idea of that with the whole traveling, with the idea of war and you're going to battle, I mean, and hopefully nobody dies. That's a beautiful picture of the World Cup. So, yeah.
That's fantastic. I love that metaphor. And I never thought about the fact that you can sense a country's culture by watching how their team plays.
Yeah. Excellent. Well done.
All right, Javi, where can folks learn more about you or connect with you?
Okay, so in this case, I think, you can learn more about me or connect with me through social media, more specifically LinkedIn or Instagram. My username is Javier Mombiela. Just like, it's hard. It's hard to pronounce more for you guys, Americans, but maybe I could send you the link somewhere, Poland, and you could share it.
We can put that. We can put that. Make that available. And you're getting a degree in computer science and going into cybersecurity, right?
Yeah, that's right. Right now, I'm in my third year of computer science, and I want to specialize in cybersecurity. Correct. Excellent.
All right. Thank you, Greg. Where can folks learn more about the Bob Jones University Bruins or connect with you?
Yeah. So my go-to on social is Instagram. That's what we update and hang out with the most. You can see videos of the guys training or whatever sprints I have them doing that day. And the handle there is just BJU, Bruins with an S, MSOC for men's soccer. So MSOC. So BJU Bruins, MSOC. But yeah, it's a great way to connect with us, and we'd love to see any friend join. So.
Yeah, we don't live all that far from Bob Jones. I should come over. I've never seen one of the games.
Oh man, come on!
The team is fabulous, but I've never seen one of the games.
Yeah, come on over.
All right. Well, thank you both for being here. You can join us next week for a conversation about sports journalism. We'll be talking with Dr. Brian Denham from Clemson University and Matt Marine from WACH Fox in Columbia, South Carolina.
Yeah, lots of fun. So as we kick off this new theme of sports, literally kicking it off. And so this is going to be so much fun. We want to ask all of you to please leave us a review, rate us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, and become a subscriber to the afterwordpodcast.com it does help us keep the conversations going. As always, please remember you are welcome at our table.